Liebe Frau Ministerin, wir wurden gerade daran erinnert, dass Österreich demnächst am 1. Juli den Vorsitz der Europäischen Union übernimmt. Und Sie werden deswegen in Katowice am Ende des Jahres bei der Internationalen Klimakonferenz tatsächlich diese vermutlich ziemlich schwierige Verhandlungen führen. Und deswegen die erste Frage an Sie. Was sind Ihre Ziele und Ihre Hauptprioritäten für diese sicherlich nicht so leichte Verhandlung?
Ja, also ich glaube, zum einen ist es einmal ganz entscheidend, dass wir einen strategischen Prozess aufsetzen. Der hat eigentlich im Jänner begonnen mit dem Talanoa-Dialog, wurde heute schon einige Male auch angesprochen und ich glaube, das ist genau eben auch dieser richtige Zugang. Also durch diesen Prozess des Dialoges die EU-Mitgliedstaaten zusammenzubringen und wir sehen schon, obwohl es jetzt eigentlich ein sehr junger Prozess ist, dass diese Unterschiedlichkeit der Sichtweisen und der Betrachtungen eigentlich die größte Herausforderung ist. Also auch hier sind wir speziell als österreichische Bundesregierung sehr engagiert, eben auch die Bühne zu bieten und ich darf auch wirklich noch einmal ein herzliches Dankeschön an Arnold Schwarzenegger, Monika Langthaler und den Organisatoren sagen, dass sie eben auch hier den R20-Gipfel nach Wien bringen, weil das auch wieder ein Meilenstein dafür ist, dass wir das Bewusstsein erhöhen, eben über Talanoa-Dialog und mehrere, diesen Weg hin zur COP24 zu ebnen. Und Sie haben es bereits angesprochen, die COP24 in Katowice wird eigentlich eine der größten Herausforderungen für uns sein. Die Euphorie des Klimagipfels von Paris ist teilweise etwas verflogen, mag vielen politischen Umständen geschuldet sein, aber ich glaube, es ist jetzt unsere Aufgabe, die Dinge am Boden zu bringen und da gibt es zwei Prioritäten. Zum einen ist es dieses Rulebook, also wirklich dieser Weg hin zu den Maßnahmen, die jeder einzelne Mitgliedstaat, jeder einzelne Vertragspartner eben auch zu erfüllen hat. Und das zweite und ganz, ganz wichtige ist das Thema Finanzierung. Also wie können wir diesen Climate Fund wirklich auch auf derart solide Beine stellen, gemeinsam mit den Entwicklungsländern, damit wir wirklich diesen Prozess vorantreiben können. Und es wurde heute schon mehrmals auch angesprochen, die Ankündigung der Vereinigten Staaten von Amerika, aus dem Paris-Abkommen auszusteigen, hat natürlich für sehr viel Verunsicherung gesorgt. Und es ist jetzt unsere Aufgabe und hier speziell auch kommt Österreich eine große Verantwortung zu als Ratspräsidentschaft, die wir ja im zweiten Halbjahr haben, dass wir speziell auch die EU-Staaten zusammenbringen und hier eine starke Allianz global bilden, um das Paris-Abkommen mit Leben zu erfüllen, um es erfolgreich zu machen, um wirklich eben auch diesen Veränderungen beizutragen. Und dieser Verantwortung sind wir uns bewusst und ganz ehrlich, wir freuen uns schon sehr auf diese Aufgabe.
Danke sehr. Und auf dieses sehr wichtige Thema der Finanzierung gehen wir auch noch einmal nachher ein, denn wir haben auch bei uns den Leiter des Green Climate Funds. Aber noch mal eine Frage an Sie, denn Sie haben neulich Ihre neue integrierte Klima- und Energiestrategie vorgestellt. Dabei haben Sie auch noch einmal beteuert, welches Commitment Sie zu den Pariser Klimazielen aufbringen. Was sind die 2 oder 3 absolut wichtigsten Maßnahmen und Schritte, die Sie jetzt unternehmen wollen, um diese Ziele zu erreichen?
Ja, wie bereits angesprochen, die österreichische Bundesregierung hat ein absolutes Commitment zu den Paris-Verträgen und zu der Wichtigkeit des Klimaschutzes. Und so wie es auch schon einige Male angesprochen worden ist, es ist sehr, sehr schwierig, einen integrierten Ansatz zustande zu bringen. Also dieser vermeintliche Widerspruch zwischen Nachhaltigkeit, Klimaschutz, Umweltschutz und Wirtschaftswachstum und Wohlstand, den gilt es aufzulösen. Und wir haben gemeinsam mit Bundeskanzler Sebastian Kurz als eine unserer ersten Prioritäten genau diesen Kampf des Klimawandels uns auch verschrieben und sind innerhalb der ersten 100 Tage auch mit einem Entwurf dieser Mission 2030, also unserem langfristigen Weg hin zur Dekarbonisierung gegangen und wollen das jetzt auch mit Leben erfüllen. Und für uns sind 2 Bereiche besonders wichtig. Das ist zum einen das Thema Energieeffizienz. Wie schaffen wir es einfach, den Energieverbrauch zu reduzieren? Und das zweite ist, Wie schaffen wir es, erneuerbare Energien wirklich zum absoluten Standard einzusetzen und einzuführen? Wir wollen bis zum Jahr 2030 100% Strom aus erneuerbaren Energien erzeugen in Österreich. Das ist ein sehr, sehr ambitioniertes Ziel, aber es kann uns gelingen. Und es wird ein wichtiger Schritt dahingehend sein, dass wir bis zum Jahr 2050 wirklich eben auch diese Dekarbonisierung vorantreiben können. Und zwei wichtige Sektoren, die außerhalb des Emissionshandels zu finden sind und die eigentlich auch in Österreich sowie in vielen anderen Staaten die Hauptemittenten sind, das ist das Thema Gebäude. Also wie schaffen wir es auch hier, mehr Energieeffizienz einzubringen? Und das zweite Thema ist Mobilität und Verkehr. Und ich glaube hier, und der Bundespräsident hat es angesprochen, stehen wir Gott sei Dank auch vor einem riesengroßen Technologiesprung. Also hier haben wir sehr, sehr viele Möglichkeiten und wir gehen gemeinsam mit Wissenschaft, mit Forschung, mit innovativen Unternehmen diesen Weg, um eben auch die Mobilität umzubauen. Ich bin hier auch meinem Regierungskollegen Bundesminister Hofer sehr dankbar, dass sie das nicht allein als Umweltministerin machen muss, sondern dass eben auch wirklich die gesamte Bundesregierung und alle Minister da dahinter stehen. Und eines ist auch noch ganz entscheidend, Klimaschutz, eine integrierte Klima- und Energiestrategie, die Mission 2030, das ist alles kein Selbstzweck. Wir müssen eine Bewusstseinsveränderung und auch Bewusstseinsbildung vorantreiben. Das heißt, jeder Einzelne in der Bevölkerung muss erkennen, dass das nicht irgendwelche Reden sind, die Politiker halten, sondern dass mein eigenes Verhalten als Bürger, als Bürgerin dazu beiträgt, eben diesen Klimawandel aufzuhalten. Und auch hier bin ich überzeugt davon, dass es uns nur gelingen kann, wenn wir nicht auf Wohlstand verzichten müssen, sondern dass das eben einhergeht und dass wir es wirklich eben schaffen, durch das Verändern unseres Handelns die Bevölkerung zu Verbündeten zu machen.
Vielen herzlichen Dank. Und auch zum Thema Energieeffizienz am Bau und Transport, auch darauf kommen wir noch einmal zurück, denn das sind gerade Themen, die für Städte sehr, sehr wichtig sind. It is my pleasure now to welcome as our second member of the panel, the leader of a country whose wealth has been built on fossil fuels, but which is now producing its domestic energy almost 100% from renewables. A warm applause, please, for Norway's Prime Minister, Erna Solberg. Welcome to you, Prime Minister. So, indeed, an amazing transformation that Norway has undertaken. And I wonder if you could tell us, please, what is driving that and what are the most effective instruments that you are using to decarbonize? And also, what are the main challenges that you encounter on this very ambitious path?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that thank you for inviting me, and I think it's an exciting conference. And I'd also like to say that there's a lot of people who believe that there is a conflict between sustainability and environmental sustainability and the climate goals we have and creating jobs and welfare. Our strategy is the total opposite. We believe that reaching the climate goals is good for business, it's good for welfare, and that's why we have a policy of working to make sure that our competitiveness is based on more green growth. Okay, it's a dilemma. We are in a... Thank you. It is a dilemma because we are a fossil fuel country in the fact that we are producing it, but we are nearly not using it at home at all. And we have two types of mechanisms. The one is encouraging innovation through public and private partnership, which means that, for example, Norway is has a large maritime industry. We build a lot of ships. We have made sure that we have programs to ensure that that becomes greener. We have the first ferry who goes commercially over one of the fjords on the western part of Norway, who is electrical. Next year we will have the first container ship, which is both electrical and autonomous, that will go by the Norwegian coastline with goods and products. As a result of this private-public partnership that we have, where we provide funds for innovation, but the creative ideas of the business is doing the job. And then we are in forefront of CCS, carbon storage and capture, which is one of the areas where we believe that the future, in fact, is if we are going to reach the Paris goals, we need to have CCS projects that is functioning. That's the one side, creativity, innovation. The second side is to use taxation. We are taxing emissions in Norway. We are part of the ETS system for the international competitive part of our businesses, but we are taxing quite heavily CO2 emissions. That's one of the reasons why the production of oil and gas has in Norway has one of the lowest footprints compared to most other countries, because we are taxing the emissions that are from the production. We are also using our tax system so that we have the highest percentage of electrical cars in any country in the world, because they don't pay any taxes, while fossil fuel-based cars are paying quite heavily taxes. That means that it's a good bargain for a Norwegian family to buy an electrical car, which we push the limits and we get new cars, and we see that this really has an impact also on the world market. And because we have this surplus of hydropower in Norway, we also are charging our electrical cars by green energy, so it's a plus-plus system for our transportation sector. But that does not mean that we don't have challenges. We will have to continue like that. And of course, increasing taxation is demanding. When we have put up higher taxation on petrol in Norway, it always is a discussion. So when we do it in several businesses, there's always a discussion. But you have to look at this as also future competitiveness, and that's why we are using our tax system quite efficiently to achieve this. So that's maybe the two most important aspects of our policies. And the third one is, of course, because of our surplus of hydropower, we are trying to help the rest of Europe a bit. We are now building interconnectors on electricity to green electricity to Britain, and we are doing it to Germany, so that we will, when they have more wind and solar power, they need stabilizers, and then the Norwegian and the Nordic energy union that we already have will help giving green energy to stabilize for those days when the wind is not the wind is not blowing and the sun is not shining, which might happen sometimes in Northern Europe.
So a great example there, that last piece of systemic solutions to a systemic challenge. Many thanks. It is now my honor to ask to the stage the leader of a country whose website declares that it has, quote, seen the writing on the wall and will wean itself completely off of fossil fuels by 2050. And ladies and gentlemen, he deserves an especially warm welcome because he has chosen to spend his birthday with us. Please welcome the Prime Minister of Denmark, Lars Løkke Rasmussen. Happy birthday. Can I put you right there? Turn there. Okay, please. Welcome to you, Prime Minister, and happy birthday, I think I can say for everybody here in the room. The Danish government has adopted its Energy Strategy 2050 that has been called a declaration of energy independence from oil, coal, and gas. So can you share with us just one or two concrete instruments or actions that you are taking to reach this very ambitious goal of being completely free from fossil fuels by 2050?
Well, of course I can. Thank you very much, and thank you for greeting me on my birthday. And thank you, Arnold, for the song this morning. Something I didn't really have expected. So thank you very much, everybody, and it's nice to be here. And I want to congratulate our Austrian host for organizing this important event. And it's nice to be gathered with so many climate action heroes here today. And of course, it's now time to deliver, and that's what we are trying to do in Denmark. And as you rightly said, we have defined the goal that we should be completely independent of fossil fuels in 2050. And in order to achieve that long-term vision, we have defined that in 2030, at least 50% of our energy consumption should come from sustainable sources. So we have a long way to go, but we have already come a long way. We have the highest share of wind power per capita in the world. And under the right circumstances, all of Denmark's electricity is produced by wind turbines and exported to our neighboring countries. As Erna just said, we have long time ago established this Nordic energy market, and that's the main reason why we have invested so much in wind energy. It's a nice source of energy, of course, but there will be silent days as well, where the wind is not blowing, and then we can draw on Norwegian energy instead. So we are going to invest further in wind energy. And to be more specific, we want to invest 2 billion euros in clean energy, including the largest offshore wind farm in Danish history, which will have the capacity to supply what's equivalent to the 7 biggest cities in Denmark. But it's not only about the supply side, it's also about the demand side. So we have decided to work hard to ensure lower electricity prices in order to make better use of the green energy we produce. So in order to secure that green electricity is a greater part of our citizens' everyday life. So it is a combination of building up capacity and lowering taxation on electricity, green electricity. But I think it's important to stress that this cannot be achieved by any government or by any company or by any city. We have to work together. So there's also an international dimension of all this, and we have promised the UN Secretary General that we will champion the building of a clean energy investment coalition. So when we reach the summit in New York 2019, we will show the world how governments and regions and cities and companies and investors are committing to clean energy investments.
And apropos working together, Denmark has launched an alliance, a global alliance on climate change, P4G. It's become a mantra at events like this to talk about the need for joined up action. So perhaps you can just say a word about what you think alliances like P4G can achieve on this road to Katowice, to the next UN climate conference. We were reminded that road remains bumpy. And what do you think an alliance like P4G can do?
Well, I would be delighted to say just a few words about P4G. What is P4G? P4G is Partnering for Global Goals and Green Growth 2030. So the idea is to combine what we agreed in Paris with the SDGs adopted in New York. And the climate agreement and the SDGs comes, of course, with a price tag, but also with a lot of business opportunities. So I think it's about bringing countries and cities and regions and NGOs and business together. And that's why we have joined hands with Chile, Colombia, Ethiopia, Kenya, Korea, Mexico, and Vietnam. And hopefully others will join us as well. And we launched this initiative last year at the UNGA in New York. And the idea is to create this action-oriented group of government, but also businesses, international organizations, academia, and civil society, with the aim to accelerate delivery on the SDGs and the Paris Agreement by building and scaling new public-private partnerships. We will host the very first summit in Copenhagen this October. We have organized this network with the Secretariat in Washington. We have just had an international call for concrete projects, and we received more than 400 applications, which truly shows that there is a demand out there. And I totally echo what Arnold Schwarzenegger just said about not being victims, but actually be positive about all this, because if you ask the business communities, they see a huge potential. And what we need is to bring, as the R20 initiative launched by Arnold Schwarzenegger today, is to bring people together. And that's the idea behind this summit in Copenhagen. It will take place the 19th and 20th October this year, and of course everybody are most welcome.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister Rasmussen. Our next speaker, ladies and gentlemen, says the success of Europe's energy transition will do nothing less than decide the continent's future place on the world's geopolitical map. He has set himself the task of putting into place by next year a complete legal framework for what he calls the most comprehensive and deepest transformation of energy systems in Europe since the Industrial Revolution. Please welcome Maroš Šefčovič, Vice President of the European Commission for Energy Union. So nice to see you again. Take that seat right there. Welcome to you, Commissioner, and please tell us more, if you would, about the Commission's plans to realize those ambitious goals that I just mentioned, and in particular, how you want to put the European Union back into the driver's seat, because at the moment, it's not at the very forefront.
I have to say that thanks to Elisabeth, we had very fruitful breakfast brainstorming, and I think that such a conclusion from that morning session was that what we need to succeed in this effort, it's actually not that complicated. We need good laws, we have proper financing, and we need to restore the passion for our efforts and present our citizens the vision, how we are going to accomplish that. And I think that in Paris, really a milestone was reached where I think the mankind for the first time decided to do a good thing, to make sure that we will find as a global community the climate change. What we are doing in Europe, as you rightly pointed out, we are going through very deep transformation. We are leaving the centralized fossil-based energy system and going for modern, smart, decentralized and renewable energy sources. By the end of this year, and I believe that Elisabeth as a president of the Energy Council will help us to achieve that, we should complete all legal work on this new setup where we are, as a first major economy, translating all our Paris commitments into the binding laws. So what we promised will become law, and I'm sure will be fulfilled. And beside that, we are also working a lot to also offer the vision. We've been very much inspired by Norway introducing electric cars, and now we are working together to make sure that we will not only drive the cars, but we will manufacture them here in the best, smartest way, including the batteries, which are becoming the strategic assets. And then we are also working on the infrastructure for these cars, so we will not have the smartest infrastructure only for charging, but also we would have the best sky infrastructure, thanks to our super precise satellites, to make sure that we would use the navigational services, let's say, for better congestion management and smart traffic organization. And I also agree with both prime ministers that we also need to show the people that we are winning, that we can really offer them the new jobs, that they shouldn't be worried about this transition, and that we can really offer them new economic future if it comes even to the coal transition region. And the last thing, I think that we need to work on this together with the global community, and I'm very glad that with R20 and with the governor, we set up such a good working relationship, because together we are going to work in Africa, and we just found the way how we can support with very substantial amount of money, maybe up to €1 billion, the sustainable cities in Africa. So these are the projects. This is how I believe that Europe is a pioneer, is a leader, and will definitely stay in that position in the future as well.
Thank you. Short interruption. Let us just say goodbye to Prime Minister Rasmussen. Unfortunately, he does have to leave us a bit early. So many thanks for being with us, Prime Minister. Vice President, just one short follow-up question to you, because you talked about vision. The last time that we saw each other was at the Berlin Energy Transition Dialogue, where you outlined a vision of EU energy union as what you called the engine of a fourth industrial revolution led by Europe. So just one word on what fuel you think should drive that engine.
I think definitely renewable, and I think the best fuel for this change to happen is the public support we get from our citizens. Great work of our cities who decided to show this European leadership to their partners, and they transformed this very successful European covenant of mayors into the global covenant where they're ready to share clean tech, green tech, and also the way how to promote sustainable solutions for the future. So that would be the best support, best fuel we who are trying to steer the process in the right direction can get.
So the man who's steering that engine, many thanks to you, Commissioner Šefčovič. Ladies and gentlemen, our final member of this solutions panel is a scientist who has dedicated her life to studying the bonds between living beings and nature. At the forefront of the conservation movement for decades, she says the challenge has never been as urgent as now. And she recently asked how it's possible that the most clever species to walk the earth appears to be bent on destroying its home. Please welcome the great pioneer and United Nations Messenger of Peace, Jane Goodall. Jane Goodall, welcome. Would you like to take that seat? Thank you. You recently listed a wide range of developments that are hurting wildlife, hurting the environment, but you highlighted climate change as the threat with potential to do most damage. What kind of solutions do you see for making a turnaround possible?
Well, my voice is going to be a little different to the other voices that we've been listening to this morning. And when you have spent a lot of time, as I have, out in the rainforest, and you're passionate about saving the biodiversity of the rainforest, you look at climate change and the ways of alleviating it in a slightly different way. It's very obvious that the two great ecosystems that remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and however quickly we move into clean green energy, those emissions are out there. And the key ecosystem in my life is the forest, particularly the tropical forest. And the other one, of course, is the ocean. Both of them absorb carbon dioxide. And our rainforests are disappearing at a terrifying rate, and our oceans are being polluted, and their ability to absorb CO2 diminished. So what do we do about this? Everything I find is interrelated. I learned that from the rainforest. And flying over the tiny Gombe National Park, where I studied chimpanzees. When I began in 1960, the little park was part of a great equatorial forest belt stretching from East Africa to the West Coast. When I flew over in 1990, it was a tiny island of forest surrounded by completely bare hills, more people living there than the land could support, too poor to buy food from elsewhere, overused infertile farmland, people struggling to survive. And this is when I realized that unless we do something to improve the lives of the people, then there's no way that we can conserve either the chimpanzees, the other animals, or the forests themselves. So we began a program, the Jane Goodall Institute, to try and improve the lives of the people in a holistic way, find livelihoods that would not involve destroying the forest. In their desperate effort to grow food, they cut down the last trees, even on the steep slopes, or to make charcoal. And so eventually we were able to introduce microcredit and family planning, because this is a very important subject which is seldom talked about. But, you know, when you have, if you just look at it as a piece of land with so many people, and you double that number of people, and you double it again, and you have nowhere else to go, you're in trouble. Yeah. So our program has now been so successful that the people have now become our partners in conservation. They're monitoring the success of their village forest reserves. The bare hills have gone. If you fly over, you won't see those bare hills anymore. The people's lives are better, and the animals are much better off than they were. And the last thing I would say is it's not just carbon dioxide. that's leading to these greenhouse gases. It's also methane.
Yeah.
And as people get richer and richer around the world, more and more meat is eaten. This leads to horrendously cruel conditions for animals in the factory farms. It also means that the animals must be fed, habitats are cleared in order to grow the grain, huge amounts right now of fossil fuel to take the meat, the grain to the animals and the animals to the abattoir and the meat to the table. And of course, as animals eat, including us, food goes in one end and gas comes out the other, and that's methane. And so all of these things are interrelated, and alleviating poverty, eating less meat, two very important things that we can do.
Thank you very much. And of course, that first example that you mentioned, absolutely an example of what it takes to break the links in that vicious cycle that I mentioned earlier. Now, there is no continent on Earth facing graver climate strain than the one where you spent decades of your life. So perhaps you could just briefly tell us, please, what does Africa need most?
Well, as I said before, everything is so interrelated. And I've already talked about one of the main things, alleviation of poverty. But right now, we also have to do something about corruption, because it's corruption that is causing so many of Africa's problems. And I know that this is a sort of long-term solution, but I've been working since 1991 on a program for young people. We call it Roots and Shoots. And it's now in 100 countries with about 150,000 active groups, and a group can be a whole school, kindergarten, university, everything in between. And they're choosing projects to make the world a better place for people, animals, and the environment, rolling up their sleeves and taking action. It began in Tanzania with 12 high school students. I don't know how many million trees that they've planted, but they and all the others around the world are growing up with a different attitude. We talked about changing attitudes today. And so it's going to be the young people who have this philosophy of making decisions today based not only how will this benefit me or my next election campaign, but how will this benefit our descendants, generations ahead. And you mentioned at the beginning that I talked about this most intellectual species destroying its planet. Why? Because it seems that there has been a disconnect between this clever brain that's doing all these innovations that we've been talking about and the human heart, which is love and compassion.
Thank you. Thank you, Jane Goodall, for those very moving words. And ladies and gentlemen, you can hear Ms. Goodall later on this evening at the R20 movie night at the Gartenbau Kino here in Vienna. She will be having a talk with Monika Langthaler and also Kurt Fadon, who, of course, was the producer of that opening video that we saw and of the movie Good Shepherds. And that movie will then be screened in its full length following the talk. And tickets are still available for the movie night, so you can register on the Summit's website for that. And dear panel members, dear leaders, I am very sorry, but we are going to have to leave it there because we have a lot more in store on this morning, but you have given us a very inspiring impulse to begin with, so many thanks to all of you. Let's give them a warm round of applause, please, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much. Commissioner, thank you so much.